this freaking excerpt, Jesus Christ, this is hard stuff. Prokofiev Classical Symphony, there is no excerpt harder for me. Maybe Copeland, but no one. Copeland is yet not quite as popular. So in the meantime, this is what gives me nightmares. It just seems like every measure is a new chance to disappoint yourself. What makes this excerpt so unusual is that you have to have such a specific plan for your bow for like every little thing, and the plan is not gonna be necessarily very consistent. It's super ad hoc, just trial and error, like realizing, okay, wrist has to be up for this, arm has to be down for this measure. It's just like everything takes that sort of thought process to figure out what's going to be successful, or at least what's going to give you a fighting chance. I like go back and forth about what is the crux of this excerpt. The opening is a pretty good candidate, although the end is unexpectedly hard. And then also the middle, can't forget about the middle. So overall, I would say the opening, middle, and end are all the hardest part of this excerpt. For starting this, first of all, this first chord just has to sound nice. And I'm thinking about like making contact with the string, but really just pulling with the bow and not pressing, because it's so easy to just kill the sound right off the bat. So you want to get a nice resonant tone and stay on the string. And those notes all have to be loud. And then this has to be so quiet. And then here, I'm really thinking about rotating with my wrist. In about half of a second, you're going from sustain to marcato stroke to really fast 16th notes to this wrist off the string stroke, which is a ton to think about in transition. You just have to figure it out piecemeal and then figure out the transitions and hope that the muscle memory comes through at the end of the day. After this opening salvo, you have this quintuplet figure, which is just saturated with detail. You have to, first of all, have the hairpins over the whole figure, but within the context of hairpins, you have to get the accent. It's too much to think about. I know that this is sort of a simplification. I think the important thing is you start, first note is quieter than the second note, the third note is quieter than the second note, and then you crescendo, and then as long as the last note, the last B is really quiet, I think it'll sound like you've done the hairpin. So if successful, there's sort of this type of vocalization. I'm so sorry, I just made that noise with my mouth. And then the last thing is that the eighth note it's a different note value than the quintuplets. So there's just a lot of unevenness that you have to make sound like a natural musical idea. So that's just really hard. On the third and fourth lines, I feel like my bow's always out of control for the ups, the repeated ups. I really have to think about my arm level to put myself in the right position to do that repeated up sort of wrist finger stroke. I think probably the most famous part of this excerpt is the letter D writing, which is very unusual, very Prokofiev-y, with the string crossing. The most important thing is to just give yourself time to do them. That said, it has to be super rhythmic, but you have time to do the string crossings. You just have to believe that it's going to be there. Just sit on the beat and not rush through and not be tempted to freak out in this section. Another thing that helps me is minimizing the amount of arm motion I am doing to get from the E string to the D string. Something that's way harder than it should be is the septuplets right at the end. These seem like they're just going to be simple diatonic scales, but they're just so fast that it becomes a problem. Once you get up there, I think you're pretty likely to hit the run if you can get the first four notes. So that's sort of the bird's eye overview of this excerpt. There is so much to figure out, and it goes on for a pretty long time too. I'm filled with dread at the prospect of playing this excerpt. My greatest aspiration on the violin is to one day not worry when playing this excerpt, and I hope that everyone else accomplishes that as well. After dumping on the Prokofiev first movement excerpt for however long I just ranted at the camera for, I really, really like the last movement excerpt. And I should say that I love this piece. I think it's phenomenal. I just think it's really hard. And the last movement's also hard, but it's so much more straightforward and so much more fun to play. This one was totally new for me when I was learning it and recording it. My biggest takeaway from this excerpt is how exciting it sounds when you get really dramatic dynamic contrasts. Obviously this first measure is like ridiculously written, that you have the accented fortissimo eighth note, and then piano, and then pianissimo. It's overkill in one sense, but also if you can actually hear the difference, it does sound super exciting. And if you can stay piano for this whole opening bit, while still being really clear, it just has this sort of breathless energy to it that I just think is important for executing this one. I think of like a very elaborate like clockwork device. The violin part here is just these tiny gears moving really quickly in really intricate ways, but the overall function of the machine is unified and it's beautiful. So you have to be this little clockwork engine and be really precise and really clear, but also contributing to this bigger, elegant product. Obviously the accents and highlighting them, bringing those out, always going to be really important, especially in anything neoclassical or 20th century. In terms of playing these runs, I think that really strong finger articulation can help just sweep through them and not get hung up. Especially this one in the flat key. I don't even know, is this D flat major, A flat? Just thinking about those nice finger drops makes that one a lot easier than it looks. One other thing that I found helpful, at letter C, you might sort of think that the hard stuff's over when you're getting to the end of the excerpt, but I do think that these octave Gs are pretty tough. I think that you can actually get too loud and dynamic when you get to the high G up there, and it only is going to mezzo forte, so the register change will probably accomplish the crescendo without me having to kick that top note very much. So just like a little bit of vibrato, and just trust the way that your violin works. Not saying that this one is easy or anything, but the music is easier to make sense of. It's a hell of a lot of fun to play. Even if you screw it up, it's only like 35 seconds long. At least the pain doesn't last very long. Enjoy playing this one. I know I did, and I hope to see it on more lists in the future.